Join me for the couch and the culture. Now, wait a minute. Make it make sense.
Hey, clients. What do you mean talk therapy feels like backdoor extortion?
I feel like I'm not a man if my girl get a therapist.
Who said that? Baby, go to therapy and do the work.
Parasocial.
The Barbs, the Beehive. I don't know these people personally. They don't know I exist.
Black people struggle with going to finding therapists.
It's a process.
Yeah.
It's like dating.
Let me introduce the couch and the culture, where therapy meets what's trending.
Hey, clients. Welcome back to The Couch and the Culture, where therapy meets what's trending. I am your host, Lakia, and I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I am so excited to have you joining me for today's episode of The Couch and the Culture. Just a reminder before we get started, please check the description box to find the disclaimers so that we have an understanding of what to expect here on these episodes. Also, be sure to follow me on all of my social medias listed. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. If you are listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, please be sure to follow the show, rate the show, and again, just share this. Moving right into things, I was very ducked off during Black History Month. I gave one episode and then completely just went ghost. So we're back, and we're just gonna kick things off with Who Said That. So for today's Who Said That, I want us to listen to this particular clip, and then I'll come back and share my thoughts on it.
So as of today, I have done something that I never thought I would do. I inactivated my license and I quit my job as a therapist. And I feel so relieved, but not for the reasons that y'all think, right? The Lord revealed to me that he needs more of his believers in area of deliverance, not in the area of diagnosing. Because the thing is that, oh Lord, and hear me by the Spirit, these people do not have mental health issues. These are demonic beings that have access to their body, to their mind, to their soul. And what they are doing is they're manifesting the physical symptoms of being present with those demons.
Before I even begin to talk about that clip, for the content of it, let me preface this by saying, I never want to use my platform, as small as it may be, we're just getting started. Even still, I never want to be a person that I am on the internet in a way that is dogpiling, punching down, whatever you want to call it. That is never going to be my objective on this platform. I believe that there can be a disagreement with dignity. There can be kindness in correction. I don't necessarily have to agree with what you're saying to treat you with some level of respect. Hearing the young lady's video, the former therapist, counselor, whatever she was, talk about inactivating her license based on her Christianity, based on her faith. Everyone has their own walk. I think there is such danger with the amount of stigma that mental health already has. As we get further along in the show today, we'll talk about the issue of unaliving in greater detail. But there are just so many people who are struggling, who are not doing well, and to add something that's going to be further stigmatizing on top of it, I just think that's so dangerous right now. So that was my initial thought was, oh my, I hope people don't hear this and kind of feed into the stigma of what mental health treatment and therapy really is. If we go back to, I think it was my second episode of this show, and I talked about the reasons Black people don't go to therapy. One of the reasons I mentioned on there had to do with the religious component and how, you just need to pray it out. And, if you put your hope and your faith in God, he'll take care of it. He'll heal you, all of that. And again, I'm of the belief God gave me this education so that I can use it for helping others. So there's that. The other thing is saying these are people who just have demonic spirits and don't necessarily need a diagnosis. Here's what I say. I don't practice. I didn't become an LCSW just so I can diagnose everybody, send a bill to insurance, and move along. That's not why I got into the practice. But what I will say is if you feel that there's something not going well with you, you usually want a diagnostic before you can move forward. Perfect example. If something is wrong with your car, it's making a funny sound. When you take it to the shop, you don't just want them to start throwing parts at it. I mean, I think about the episode of Martin when he was like, your camshafter. That's not what you want. You want someone to run a diagnostic assessment first. Once they can tell you what the problem is, okay, now here's how we fix it. It's the same way in therapy. And I'll be the first to say, you don't always have to be in therapy just because something is wrong. Sometimes I just want to improve something or prevent it from going wrong. Even still, I am clearly defining what my target is, what the current presentation is. To say that we don't need more diagnosis, we just need more deliverance. What am I healing? The therapist is not doing the healing. The therapist is not doing the hard work. Sure, I may be pointing you in the direction, I may be guiding you, but I don't ever put myself in a position to think that I am God and that I'm healing anybody. The relationship with me, the therapeutic relationship with me may be the way in which someone, gets the tools to find their healing. But I'm never that self-absorbed to think I'm doing the healing. And I'm also not shallow enough to think that religion alone can tackle some of the things that people come into therapy for. People may be coming into therapy because of childhood trauma, because of systems of oppression, discrimination, workplace violence, a number of reasons people may be coming into therapy. And if all we had to do was pray it away during the civil rights movement, the way Black people was knee deep in them churches, that should have solved it all, right? So I'm never going to be that naive to think that that's the solution. And I would never want to pass that rhetoric along. And then to say those are just demonic spirits. You saying someone's living with a demon or has a demon within them, however you want to characterize it, is that still not a judgment, a diagnosis, however you want to look at it? I struggled with that. And again, this is not to pile onto her, to attack her character, her being. This is just for anybody who may have listened to that and felt turned off and away from mental health because of the belief that it somehow cannot coexist with their faith. So moving right along, the next thing that's happened over the last few weeks that I've not been filming has to do with the whole situation at the BAFTAs with Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo. I want to make sure we talk about this situation here. I had a lot of thoughts about it, but there was someone who I think actually did a really nice job of summarizing a lot of what I would say. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
So during the 79th British Academy Film Awards, while Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo were presenting, an audience member audibly shouted the N-word. So reports are identifying the individual as John Davidson, a Tourette's advocate whose life was featured in the film I Swear. The host, Alan Cumming, addressed the audience and said the outbursts were related to Tourette Syndrome and thanked people for their understanding. Now here's where this gets complicated. Tourette Syndrome is a neurological condition. A small percentage of people with Tourette's experience something called coprolalia, which is involuntary vocalization of socially inappropriate words. Tourette's does not invent language. It removes the brain's filter. It does not create new words out of thin air. Research shows that coprolalia tends to latch onto words that are culturally taboo or emotionally charged. The more forbidden a word is in society, the more likely it is to become a tic in severe cases. That does not erase the impact. Because that word is not just profanity, it carries generations of violence and humiliation. So two things can be true at the same time. Tourette's is real, coprolalia is real, and hearing that slur directed at two Black men on a global stage is very harmful. Explaining the neurological mechanism does not automatically resolve the racial harm.
Explaining the neurological condition does not resolve the racial harm. Mic drop. This is like the classic intent versus impact conversation you have a lot of times when people are talking about apologies. Maybe I had no ill will, no malintent, even if I want to give someone the absolute benefit of the doubt and assume they are not trying to be harmful, they are not trying to be racist. Even if I want to assume good intent and believe that the person was not trying to do this, that this was, again, involuntary, I can still acknowledge the impact of that behavior, that it did lead to someone being harmed, a group of people that has already, suffered through so much trauma being harmed. And I can take accountability for that. I don't think it has to be, oh, well, we need to better understand Tourette's. Please don't insult people's intelligence like that's the end of it. Or, well, this is specific to coprolalia. Knowing that usually it is the things that are so like taboo that the tics are surrounding. Again, just because I understand that doesn't mean I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not going to be harmed in any way by something you do. That's just not, and I don't know why that is so nuanced that we can't understand that it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I also think there's something about Black people where we are always expected to have a level of grace, have a level of understanding, turn the other cheek, that's not always asked of other populations. And again, baby, I only got two cheeks. It's only so many times I can turn. I'm not the Lord where I say I'm going to forgive you 70 times 70, or my grace is like, I have a limit. And I'm sure a lot of Black people feel the same way. Again, as a mental health professional, as someone who tries to have so much empathy and compassion, I can understand this was an involuntary thing and understand the impact of the harm caused and have the need to right that harm, right? To take accountability. But maybe what's not being said enough for my liking, BAFTA, whoever aired the recording, because this was pre-recorded, and apparently there were several other things that he yelled out that were inappropriate that they were able to edit out in the live. You could also edit out someone saying free Palestine, but for whatever reason, when you have Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo up there and this word gets said, we couldn't edit that out. Even with Warner Brothers allegedly reaching out to them saying, hey, I'm aware that this happened. This was harmful. Can you please? And you guys still proceeded to do it that way. You wanted that to happen. So I think there's a lot of people who need to take accountability. There's a level of accountability that's missing and a level of understanding that Black people are always expected to shoulder. Enough. Moving right along, the next thing I want to talk about, kind of a similar theme about remorse. Watching the documentary about America's Next Top Model on Netflix, a lot of what they talked about in those early seasons, I was definitely like a faithful viewer for as young as I was when this was coming out. Absolutely loved Yaya, Mercedes, Danny, a Little Rock girl. I was so excited when she won her season to now come back as an adult in my 30s, listening to, the people talk about their experiences on the show. And afterwards, you kind of have to look sideways. Now, here's what I'll say. I know over time, you learn, you know better, you do better, right? That's kind of the belief. So we have very different eyes looking at this. Again, me in my 30s versus when this came out almost 20 years ago, it's going to be very different. However, I think where I struggled in this documentary with Tyra, the lack of remorse. I think there was this need to justify, to excuse. Well, we were giving what y'all wanted. Y'all were watching Fear Factor and Survivor, and we had to keep up. Y'all wanted this type of television. hopefully you're at a point now with this much hindsight that you can recognize, you know what? That's not appropriate. You know what? I may have really messed some things up for some people. I may have made someone's time harder than what I needed to. If I can't look back and have that type of remorse and accountability, what was the point of putting that trench coat on with that heavy ass wig and getting up there and talking about the people, the situation for? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have characterized her wig as such, but nonetheless, like I just, what was the point other than to say stay tuned for cycle 25, which why would we want that after hearing all of this? To hear people talk about the ways in which they were just utterly devastated from the things that happened on the show, to know that you were using those girls' stories and pain as good television. You know, your mom, you know, was a victim of gun violence, and then I'm going to have you in this photo shoot portray someone being shot. If I can now go back and look at that and see, oof, that had a part in someone's negative experience, I need to be willing to take accountability for that and have some type of remorse. Tyra had none. Tyra thought her accountability was moving to Australia and selling hot ice cream. And baby, that ain't it. That ain't accountability. Had she got up there and looked directly in the camera and said, this is my intention when I started out. This is what I was hoping to do in terms of helping models of color, plus size women, like having representation in the industry in every form. That was my intention. Somewhere along the way, I lost the plot and it did not go in a way that I'm proud of. And I caused harm. And for that, I need to take accountability for that. My name was on the show as an executive producer, as the one pitching the show, as the one that these girls were looking to as their North Star, the person they trusted to have their bags in this process. And I didn't do that. And that is wrong. And I failed them. And I need to take accountability. Had she done that, I would have been like, you know what, Tyra? I'm with you when you're right. And right now you write about the fact that that wasn't it, but you're not going to repeat that harm. But to get up there and say, act like you didn't remember what happened with Shandy, to say, oh, I should probably call Miss J. I don't want to talk about that right now. Or, boo boo, I'm sorry. Cut it out. And specifically for the Shandy of it all, the way I remember clearly that storyline of her like cheating on her boyfriend and calling him to tell him, and him calling her an effing B, and then her going on the Tyra show and them showing the clips again. I know this wasn't in the era of Me Too, but her inability to consent because she was intoxicated. At what point are we going to have a conversation about, we filmed someone engaging in sexual activity and they were incapacitated and unable to consent? At what point do you say, you know what, I just have to call a thing a thing? I know that this is what the contract said, that you would be followed unless you went into the bathroom alone, and she wasn't alone, so we kept filming and we weren't going to interrupt. If you are in a relationship with someone, you know someone, and they struggle to take accountability, they never have remorse, they're often deflecting, they are trying to justify, trying to excuse. I don't know. Maybe this is why you probably need to go see the lady, so you can have a way to deal with that and how manage your response to that, manage your expectations with that. But yeah, final thing that I wanted us to talk about today. I got on here the very first episode right after the loss of Marshawn Nealon. That was the very first episode I recorded. And in that episode, I talked about how tragic it was that was a 24-year-old who took his own life. And I also in that same video talked about Kyron Lacey, who played at LSU, who was also a 24-year-old Black boy, young man, who took his life. And then within the time that I've been away, to hear about Rondell Moore. Rondell Moore was also a 25-year-old Black athlete in the NFL who took his own life. And it is to the point where when I am hearing these stories, it is just gut wrenching, because you have these young men who we would like to think 24, 25, your life is really just beginning. And for whatever reason, whether it is, a long-standing battle with mental health, whether it is kind of, I have this significant injury, it's an identity crisis, I'm concerned about being able to provide for all the people depending on me, the amount of pressure I may be under, the lack of identity, if this thing I've literally worked for my entire life since I'm old enough to remember may potentially be taken away from me and I don't have anything else. Like, for a number of reasons that we may never fully understand, they end up taking their life. It's just so devastating every time I hear about those things. And one of the things that I was recently watching the documentary Rethinking Strong, which was featured Ricky Williams, who I'm sure we remember from his time with the New Orleans Saints, with Miami, and the challenges he was having with his mental health and the league substance abuse policy. He was featured in the documentary that aired. And then it was also about the young lady at Southern University who is a cheerleader. And I'm so sorry that I'm blanking on her name. I need to make sure I add it in the comments. But talking about her taking her own life as well when she walked into the river following time that she had been injured during her time as a cheerleader at Southern. So we keep seeing these instances where athletes have these significant injuries and then shortly thereafter tragedy strikes. So one of the things that's mentioned in the Rethinking Strong documentary is kind of this idea that the young lady's mother talked about, anytime someone gets hurt, it should be mandatory that they have a mental health evaluation. I'm going to take it a step further. I think anytime someone gets hurt within college, professional athletics, even high school, that's super competitive now, there needs to be ongoing mental health treatment, not just that initial evaluation or you fill out this questionnaire, do you endorse these signs of depression or anxiety? There needs, in the same way that I know I'm going to schedule you for surgery, you're going to have follow-ups with the physical therapist, with the trainer. There also needs to be that same level of intervention on an emotional and psychological level, just because of how difficult it can be. And I know the NCAA came out with, their guidance. I want to say either 24 or 25. I want to say 2025, about recommending that all athletes in the NCAA have access to mental health support. But that can look very different from, say, a campus like LSU that may have multiple specialists per team, per sport, versus some places where in the documentary they mentioned at Southern there was only one or two people they had access to for all of the athletic student body. So this is something that I am so passionate about, and I want to see greater intervention in prevention, for that matter, at the high school, collegiate, and professional level, because again, these athletes really are, in addition to just being Black in America, being an adolescent in America, I'm an athlete. I have this pressure. I'm being put in a situation where maybe I'm taking care of so many people. I may be dealing with injuries that may lead to some type of addiction to a substance or pain medicine, right? There's so many reasons and risk factors that we need to be accounting for and making sure that we are covering these young people in the support that they absolutely need. We saw wide receiver AJ Brown speak up and kind of talk about it. So this is what he had to say.
I didn't know, really didn't take in consideration what depression really was. I always just brushed it off. That's how I grew up. I just brushed off my feelings, and it got the best of me, And I just wanted to put out a positive message that I'm still here. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. I'm blessed. I got a lot of things to be grateful for, and someone was there for me. So reach out to your loved ones and ask them how they're doing and listen to them, because it's important.
That was him talking about, even before the Rondell Moore situation happened, him talking about how he struggled with his own mental health and encouraging people to speak out, which I'm always going to advocate for that. I'm always going to amplify those kinds of messages. However, right after everything happened with Rondell Moore, he came out and he said this, which I know it was so well intentioned. And I want to be clear, I applaud most of what he said in this message, which was this.
But don't take the easy way out. I once thought that was the way. I don't even know how old I was. I was 23 years old. 23 years old, and I thought the same thing. I thought the same thing. Man, I have so much life ahead of me. I have so many family members who love me. I have accomplished so much. I have a beautiful family. I have a 2-year-old. I have 2 kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. Beautiful family, man. So much life that is ahead of you. God has so much in store for you guys, that so much more than just a game of football, guys.
So him trying to encourage people to find and think about all the things that they still have to live for. Here's what I'll say. If someone really is in that dark place of having those ideations, thinking about being the one to take their own lives, some of the things that we try and kind of speak to them about, well, think about this and think about this. Some of those things that you think may be a reason worth living for may actually be a burden to some people. So we want to be careful that we don't take maybe the reasons that we have for living and project it and assume that that's enough for someone else. The other thing is this. If I then say, well, think about your mom, think about this, and it would be selfish, we're then making their pain about someone else, and that's not it. More often than not, what someone is feeling is that I wish things were different. I wish things were better. And because I don't see a way that that's possible, I'm going to make the choice that I don't want to live anymore. If I don't really understand the depths of their sadness, their darkness, their despair, I don't need to make it about me. I don't need to call them selfish. I don't need to do those things. I don't need to say, don't take the easy way out, because I assure you, that doesn't feel easy to a lot of people. To a lot of people who have been there contemplating it, they don't talk about it as something that was easy to do or easy to think about. For the people who've unsuccessfully attempted, they don't describe it as something that was the easy way out. So again, I love that AJ Brown is being an advocate and speaking so openly about his own history with this. And I hope he continues to encourage people to seek help and find a reason for living and find a purpose, and not feel like you have to be so tough and hold it all in. And I want to encourage people not to think about this and use language that describes this as an easy way out. The thing that stood out to me when he was talking, he mentioned he was 23 when he contemplated taking his life. We know Kyron Lacey, Marshawn Nealon, they were 24. Rondell Moore is 25. We know post-COVID, the research that has come out has shown that Black males have had the fastest growing rates of those types of ideations and attempts, especially within this age group where we think 18 to adolescence, young adulthood. That age group had a significant increase. Such an interesting time, because you often hear people talk about 25 oh, your frontal lobe has developed, you're more mature. And it's as these young men are approaching that age or just hitting that age. And we also have to think about maybe the physical trauma that their brains may have suffered during this time that may have possibly slowed down that development of the frontal lobe. Nevertheless, I think it's really ironic that all of these talented young Black men, just as they were hitting kind of what we think about as that age of maturity. You can rent a car without that extra fee. You can do all of these things once you become 25, because now your brain's developed, so to speak. And that was around the time that they ended their lives. This is all the more reason why, and I'm going to bring this full circle, the message I started with at the top of the video about saying mental health in therapy is demonic, why that is such a dangerous idea, because we can see the people that it's impacting. We are losing our loved ones and our young people at a rate that is unacceptable. It's alarming. The last thing we need to be doing is spreading messaging that's going to further promote that's going to alienate them, that's going to ostracize them, that's going to take away a potential means of support. So just being careful with what we say and how we say it, and just being mindful of those things. So this was a bit of I don't even want to say heavy, because it's the reality we're living in. I mean, even against this current backdrop of what's happening with the US and our engagement in shit that ain't got nothing to do with us, pardon my French, these young people are having such a difficult time. And I can say this as someone that interacts primarily with young adults. This is just a very challenging time, and we need to make sure that any means of support that's available, that's not going to cause harm, that we are pushing people towards it. We are encouraging them to do those things, to take care of themselves. Make sure that you click in the description box to see the soundtrack on Apple Music for The Couch and the Culture. But today's song that I want to take us out on is actually going to be Yebba. 2 songs. We're going to do October Sky and Evergreen. Both of those songs were about her mom, who also ended up taking her life. If you can actually listen to Yebba's lyrics, once you get over the way that lady just vocally obliterates just everything, and I mean that in a positive way, she just does things that you can't sing along to, but once you get past how great her voice is, if you start to break those lyrics down, and she talks about kind of her still being left behind after her mom's unaliving, it's just, I always want to make sure, again, I'm highlighting people who have talked openly about this. Make sure you check out my playlist on Apple Music for The Couch and the Culture and give it a listen if you haven't already. So that is going to cover everything for today's episode. Until next time, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, download or follow on Apple and Spotify podcasts, rate it. Just get this out, and I hope you guys will join me back for the next episode of The Couch and the Culture. Bye bye, clients.